Yo, what's good, YouTube, man? It's Gary with another Fan TV. Back at you. The video, like the content, this video, go smash that like button at the content of this channel. Go and subscribe, man. Look, so the Ravens defeat the Chicago Bears 30 to 16, excuse me, in a game that was a must win, and the Ravens played for the most part very well. All right, so let's get right into it. Let's talk about it, right? You know, the ups and downs of the game and whatnot. All right. First of all, injuries. I didn't see really any injuries out there besides Marlon Humphrey, Ronnie Stanley. Both guys returned. They were down for a little bit on the field, and both guys came back, right? So besides that, I didn't see anything. We'll see what happens, after the game and whatnot. All right. Um, so we'll do. This is gonna be mostly positive. You know what I mean? I'll be mostly positive, but we got to talk about a couple things, right, that are negative. One, this didn't happen on the game day, but it happened yesterday. I did make a video about talking about it, right? So when I released the game preview, right, talking about the Ravens versus the Bears, I thought Lamar Jackson might be playing and whatnot. But it turns out that the Ravens pretty much lied on the injury report, right? Or at least over exaggerated Lamar Jackson's participation or what he was doing. And it turns out the Ravens are now under investigation. They're going to be fined. They're going to they might lose a draft pick, right? So the Ravens got to do better because right now it's too much confusion going on. You got to know the status of your quarterback. You can't be doing things like that. All right. That's a little embarrassing to me as an organization, right? You got to know better than that, right? Then retroactively make a statement on Saturday saying, well, actually, he's a limited participant. It's a bad look all around. All right. We're not spending too much time on that. All right. Now, things from the game, things from the actual game, right? That I would say that was still negative right now. The four-man pass rush is still not very good. The Ravens have to send pressure to get home. Now, Mike Green did get his first career sack, so I was very happy to see that. But the Ravens, if they're going to want to do something, they got to start being able to get home with four, man. I'm not trying to be harp on this point too much, but if they want to do anything, right, the pressure plans are great, things like that, but you got to start getting home with four. All right. So that was really one negative right there. And besides that, I don't really have too much else to say about that, right? You know what I mean? So let's get right into the positives, right? Now, this one you could view as a negative, but because Tyler Huntley is one of the standout performers today. He might be the standout performer of the day, right? It makes you question why the Ravens went out and spent money on Cooper Rush when Tyler Huntley is familiar with what the Ravens do. He fits the style of being Lamar Jackson's backup quarterback, right? But let's forget the Cooper Rush talk. Let's focus on Tyler Huntley, right? Today, Tyler Huntley was, let me pull it up. Tyler Huntley was 17 to 22, 186 yards, one touchdown. He added another 53 yards on the ground. He had a big run up the middle where he bumped to the back of Zay Flowers. He could have scored on that one, maybe potentially. So we're talking about over 200 yards of offense with Tyler Huntley and a touchdown, right? I would say that, I don't remember every Tyler Huntley game off the top of my head, but this is definitely one of the better games I've ever seen him play in the Ravens uniform, okay? I'm talking about from pure passing down the field, right? We're not just talking about because the Ravens won. I've never seen Tyler Huntley attempt this many downfield passes of 10 plus yards, in my memory, right? We're talking about, the over route to Zay Flowers. We're talking about the big crosser to start the second half, or big post route, whatever it was, to Rashad Bateman. Down the seam in the first half, like that kind of hole shot between cover two to Mark Andrews, right? Tyler Huntley was letting it go. There was even a play action deep shot post route to Zay Flowers, and he overshot the ball by maybe 3 to 5 yards. But the pure aggressiveness from Tyler Huntley is something that I had never seen before from him. And if the Ravens want to get that kind of backup quarterback play, they would have had a lot better record than they're sitting at 1-5 right now. All right. Today was a really good game for him. He really only made, I would say, one mistake. He probably was throwing a pick six to Kevin Byard. Kevin Byard jumps the route, but it's tipped by Tremaine Edmonds at the line of scrimmage. So that kind of throws at the time of the interception, and it just falls to the ground, right? So, the Ravens caught a break with that one. But besides that, Tyler Huntley was on point. He really was on point, right? And listen, that leads me to the next person, right? The person calling the plays, Todd Munkett. Todd Munkett has taken a lot of grief, a lot of flack over this bye week. If you want to talk about the guy that was most mentioned for things to be blamed on for the Ravens' failures, it's been Todd Munkett, right? For whatever reason that is, right? To me, I don't agree with it personally, but that's what it's been, right? It's been on Todd Munkett's shoulders, okay? And I think today he caught a really, really great game, right? He got the zone running scheme going. Now, if you want to say this, right, there's only one thing you could draw back on is that the red zone offense wasn't as potent as it should be. They got it. They kind of got it figured out in the second half. They still took too many field goals, and in times like that, if you want to nitpick on stuff like that, we could definitely do that. There was some calls that was there. That was a little bit of questionable in there. Like the QB draw to Tyler Huntley, things like that. It's things you could talk about for sure. But for the most part, I like the game that he called today. This is a guy that, like I said, all the criticism was being harped on him. And Tom Munkin showed up today, in my opinion, right? The Ravens offense looked like a functional NFL unit, right? It's not just about putting up points, which is great, but they were moving the ball. The line was blocking well on zone plays. They still are bad at power. When the Ravens have to push and get power, it's a no-go, right? But they were good enough today to get Derrick Henry some opportunities. Derrick Henry had 21 carries, 71 yards, 2 TDs today, right? Beautiful game from Derrick Henry, right? Especially the last touchdown, he gets stuff to the middle. He continues to fight, drive his feet, bounces to the outside, hits the edge, scores, right? So these are good things that we are looking for the Ravens offense, right? Another guy, honestly, Keaton Mitchell, man. Keaton Mitchell, I thought the Ravens were going to close out the game with Keaton Mitchell, honestly, the way he was running. He went out of balance too many times, right? You got to stay in balance, especially when you're trying to run the clock. But we're talking about 4 carries, 43 yards to Keaton Mitchell. I don't know how many he had on the kick return. So he had 66 yards on the kick return. So, we're talking about over 100 yards of offense today from Keaton Mitchell, right? So that's very, very encouraging, very nice to see. So this Ravens offense look like a real, real competent unit out there, right? And that's all. That's really all we wanted while Lamar Jackson was out recovering, right? Can you look like a competent unit? And the Ravens did that for the most part today, right? And then, a funny part about, the article with Tom Munkin and things like that is that there's all this talk about, the Ravens, they try to do too much. They're trying to spread the ball around too much. But when you really look at it, the ball only really goes to Zay Flowers. So where is this spreading of the ball going around to? I don't really get it. Zay Flowers today had another good game, 7 catches, 63 yards on 9 targets. Him and Tyler Huntley were locked in, right? So good game for Zay Flowers, all right? Now, some more positives, honestly, then we can get down to really talking about the game itself. Kyle Hamilton, man. Kyle Hamilton, since he's been back into his box safety role, is impacting the game at a high level. He was all over the field, right? No matter where the play was going, Kyle Hamilton ended up in that spot, So when I look at the game, when I look at the changes that the Ravens have made, Kyle Hamilton has done a great job of really causing havoc at the line of scrimmage. I mean, he caused a QB hit. He had a QB hit on Caleb Williams that made him do an intentional grounding that pretty much ended their drive. I think that was the end of the first half. He did a lot, man. So for Kyle Hamilton, he had 8 tackles today. 4 solos, 1 QB hit, like I mentioned before. Another guy, Roquan Smith, had 12 tackles today, 7 solos. I mean, Roquan had a tackle on DeAndre Swift in the open field that was, it was kind of reminiscent to me of the James Cook play where if Roquan doesn't make that tackle, he's going 50 yards. Now, James Cook, he didn't make that tackle, and James Cook went 50 yards. So he brought down DeAndre Swift in a play where it's really him one-on-one. You don't make that play. It's not a lot of other Ravens there. Great play by Roquan Smith, right? So this Ravens team, for the first time since week 2, played a game on both sides of the ball where they both had bright moments, right? I want to talk about, one of my things for the keys to the game when talking about the defensive side of the ball was, do you have a pressure plan that is effective? And Zach Orr, whatever he did during his bye week, he talked to Mike McDonald. He talked to a whole bunch of people, right? Dean Pease, other guys that he converses with, whatever. The pressure plan he came up with today was good. The Ravens had multiple blitzes that the Bears were unprepared for, that got rushers free, that made Caleb Williams speed up his clock when he didn't want to. Now, I can only think of one time where Caleb Williams really evaded a sack. It was like Teddy Buchanan came down the middle. He missed the sack. Caleb Williams doesn't end up completing the ball because Roman Dunze drops it. But still, beautiful play, right? The Ravens actually, I think there was too many times Caleb Williams was sitting in the pocket, but that was mostly on the 4-man rushes. But when the Ravens decided to blitz Caleb Williams, they looked very, very good and effective today, right? So I'm happy with that. Nate Wiggins gets an interception today, undercutting the route on Roman Dunze, who was giving them some work, you know what I'm saying? But Nate Wiggins kept fighting, right? And that turnover was a big play in the game. So now just talking about the game overall, like first half, I want to say this Ravens offense, sorry, not the Ravens offense, the Ravens defense didn't look that much change, right? The Bears were still running up and down the field pretty easily on them. The run game was working, the pass game was working. They was doing a lot of boots, rollouts. The Ravens were losing contain. So that first quarter was rough. Like Roma Dunze might have had 50, 60 yards in that first quarter, early second quarter. He might have already had 60 yards, right? But the Ravens really tightened down after that, right? So I got to give them credit for that. I got to give Zach Orr credit for that because, the way this game was going, it looks like the Bears were going to move pretty easily, and the Ravens were going to rely on bending but not breaking, because the Bears were getting down into the red zone, but the Ravens were doing enough to keep them out the end zone, right? So that's how the Bears settled for 2 field goals right there. So when I look at this game from that perspective, I thought it was going to go one way, and it completely really changed in the second half, right? This defense really tightened up, better coverage, better tackling. I'm not seeing the same communication errors. I'm not seeing guys being confused about where they're supposed to line up. Guys look pretty today. They were pretty sound on they knew where they needed to be. Is what I'm trying to say, pretty much, because that hasn't been the case always, right? There's been plenty of times where the Ravens were very, very confused on defense. Who am I guarding? Where am I lining up? What's my assignment? I didn't really see too much of today, right? So that's a very, very positive sign for Zach Orr, and that means that whatever some of the stuff they did during the bye week, it ended up working out, right? So I think that's a good positive thing for the defense as well. And then offensively, just talking about kind of how the game flow and went like that. Tyler Huntley, man, I mean, go back to how I talked about him earlier in the video. Like, he was impressive today, like truly impressive. Right now, there are still some times where, he's going to check it on a lot. He's not being overly aggressive, but when he pushed the ball down the field, he did it pretty accurately. All right, and I was impressed by that. If I'm being completely honest, when I think of a Tyler Huntley Ravens game, I think of everything is going to be within that 0 to 7 yards kind of air yards kind of completions, right? That's usually where he's been working at when we've been watching him, right? But today he worked like that most of the time, right? Because it's not always going to be open downfield in the NFL, but he still found opportunities to push that ball down the field and get guys open, right? And throw guys open, right? So to me, that's a beautiful thing, right? You can have that kind of confidence to do that, because that really hasn't been his game. Honestly, if we're being completely honest, it hasn't been his game. It's been one of the weaknesses of his game. And today, he looked good doing it, all right? He used his legs effectively. I didn't feel like he was just bailing for no reason. When he bailed, it was because, the Bears might have been playing man coverage. Everybody turned their back. Okay, boom, I can get 10 yards here, easy, free. So that was really nice to see, right? The Ravens have had a lot of controversy coming into this week. But I will say, for them to have the kind of controversy that they had coming into this week, they look largely unaffected by it, right? It's like a team that's pretty focused and disciplined, coming in, out there on the field, and they played well, right? It's not just about the result; it's about how they got to that result. The Ravens, I would say, in the first half, they had some penalties that killed them, early on, but they overcame them, right? Ronnie Stanley had like might have been like a hold or a hand step face, something like that, so that they kind of pushed the Ravens back early, but the Ravens overcame that and actually converted it was like a 2nd and 22. They ended up getting a big completion to Bateman. Then they ended up getting another completion. I think it might have been to Zay Flowers on that drive, right? And end up scoring. So that's huge news, right? You know what I mean? And then I talked about him earlier. This, to me, cements the fact of why Keaton Mitchell is so important, right? Now, is he RB1? Of course not. But can he play better than Justice Hill? Yes, right? And I'm not here to bash Justice Hill. I'm not doing that, right? I like Justice Hill. I do. But Keaton Mitchell's speed is a game changer on the edge. The Ravens are really just calling outside zone from the shotgun a lot of times. Hey, Keaton Mitchell, can you beat this defensive lineman around the corner? Yes, he can. Can you beat this corner, that safety that's coming down on the edge? Yes, he can, right? So for the Ravens, to me, for having Keaton Mitchell inactive the first month of the season because he didn't play special teams, it was stupid. There's really no other way to say it. It was dumb, right? When you have a guy this dynamic, you got to find a way to manufacture to get him touches. People would not care so much about Derrick Henry coming off the field if you had a guy that was replacing him as equally as explosive, right? That's the issue with Justice Hill a little bit, right? Like I said, we're not going to pick on Justice Hill. We like Justice Hill. But is he as explosive as a Keaton Mitchell or Derrick Henry can be? No, he's just not. That's not his game. He's a solid, reliable player, right? Explosive, that's not really him. He had a great one versus Kansas City, but the game was already over with, right? I talked about that before. But besides that, that's not really his game. So I want to see more Keaton Mitchell. They're not going to completely take the role out of Justice Hill's hands. That's cool. But I want to see more Keaton Mitchell out there. And I don't think that's a bizarre thing to ask for. All right, I really don't. And then, last but not least, right, the Ravens are still alive in the playoff hunt. They're still alive in the AFC North. The Bengals lost today to the Jets, 39-38, in a game where, the Bengals were leading for a lot of it, and the Jets are literally winless, right? So the Bengals drop a big game, and then, the Browns lose, right? So the Browns lose to the Patriots. What was the final score in that game? Myles Garrett went crazy, though. He had 5 sacks today. So great for him. They lost 32-13 today, right? So this AFC North race is wide open, and the Steelers play the Packers tonight on Sunday Night Football. And the Packers are a top team, so they could potentially lose that game. So all three AFC North teams could potentially lose today, with the Ravens picking up a W. Now the Ravens got to go into Miami, who just absolutely steamrolled the Falcons today, and they got to go get another W, right? But at least by that time, hopefully, right, the expectation is Lamar Jackson will be back. But until Lamar Jackson suits up, we're going to stop assuming that. That's honestly my fault, right? I know better than to trust to believe what John Harbaugh says. I really do know better, and for some reason, I guess low desperation, I fell for it, right? But seriously though, if Lamar Jackson is back, the Ravens are looking to absolutely go into Miami and then go from 2-5 to 3-5 and really get this train rolling. Of hey, they could possibly win the division, they can make the playoffs, this and that. So we'll see what happens, right? The Ravens have it all out in front of them, right? It's a 10-game season now, right? You picked up another W, cool. Keep it going, all right? 11-game season, whatever. But so the Ravens have a lot of opportunity in front of them, right? So that's beautiful. I'm trying to think, is there anything else that I really want to mention from this game? No, I think that's really it, man. I think that's really it, honestly, right? So the Ravens, they do what they need to do. They win 30-16. Tyler Huntley plays a very, very good game, right? If the Ravens would have played them earlier, maybe the Ravens aren't, 1-5 going into this game. Now they're 2-5. Maybe, right? Maybe it's different, right? But can't go back in the past. You are where you are right now. The defense played a lot better in the I would say that middle of the second quarter on. Defense played really well. The 4-man pass rush is still a nightmare. They can't get home. But the blitz pressure, that was effective. Now, we're not going to look too far ahead, but in the playoffs, I worry about that. But for the regular season, if you can draw some effective blitzes, great job, Zach Orr. Really, really, really great job, right? So, and then Todd Monken, who got a lot of criticism, a lot of hate from, anonymous sources, he called a good game, right? So, it's not too much for me to be negative about this game. But definitely give me your thoughts in the comments. Guys, I reply to all comments. But it's Gary Rook to the Fan TV. I'm out.